Hi everyone, it's Rachel back with the Shades of Orange. Today I want to do another round of recent horror reads. I feel like I have a really good variety in this batch, so I think there's something for everyone. All that being said, let's get into the books. First, I read a book called Ghost Radio by Leopoldo Gout, and this is about a young man who as a child got into a horrific car accident with his parents. They died and he of course survived and recovered in a Mexican hospital. While he was there, he got the opportunity to hear a radio show that involved a host interviewing people who would call in and tell their supposedly true ghost stories. And now as an adult, he has recreated that show in America and he calls the show Ghost Radio. It has the same premise and the story is partially told in the present day as he is doing his show. It's interspersed with people actually calling in and you get these little ghost stories mixed within this larger story. And then it also goes back in time to his time where he was staying at that hospital because he was staying with another young man named Gabriel, and you know that something happened between them and there's a lot of mystery in this book. It takes a while for the story to kind of pull these threads together into the narrative. I will start by saying that if you are going to read this, I highly recommend checking out the audiobook version. In my opinion, it made the experience so much more powerful. Because of the fact that this is involving radio, it makes sense to have that auditory experience, and the narrator was just quiet and creepy in his production, and I just thought that he did such a good job. So I do recommend, if you're interested in this one, go and check out the sample and see if you have that same connection to the audiobook narrator, because for me, I was hooked in from the very beginning. And I also have to say that this book has really bad reviews online, and while I ended up liking this book quite a bit, I also understand why it is not very popular. It's not going to be for everyone. This book has a very meandering plot. As I mentioned, it takes quite a while before you start to understand how everything fits together into this story. And at the same time, it's a very, very slow burn. It's very slow paced. And while I ended up really liking this book, I will be honest that earlier on, I did consider stopping it, DNFing it, and moving on to something else. However, I'm so glad that I stuck it out because it got really good towards the end. This book is just so atmospheric and it got very creepy. There were some good twists and turns that I just found chilling, and I got very much gripped into the story. It just took a little while to get there. And I will say that this book had one of the best endings that I've read in a horror book in quite a long time. I've said before that horror doesn't always do endings very well, so it's always a nice surprise when a book is elevated by the ending that actually made the book even better, and this is very much the case here. So while I ended up really liking this book, I'm still very cautious to recommend it to you because I know that a lot of you might try it out and really not like it. So I will cautiously say try it if it sounds like the kind of thing you would enjoy, if you are okay with a very slow moving plot. Do read it on audio if you can. I don't think you would have the same experience if you read it as a physical book. But if you get a chance to check it out, I would love to hear back from some of you to know if this book worked for you, or if it didn't, no worries from me. But personally, I ended up really liking this one. It's definitely one of the best audiobooks that I've read in terms of the horror genre. And I personally really liked it, and I hope that it will work for some of you as well. Next, I read a book called I Am Not Your Final Girl by Claire C. Holland, and this is a collection of horror poetry that I heard about from Stephanie, if that's what she read. Honestly, I don't normally read a lot of poetry, so I probably wouldn't have picked it up if it wasn't for her gushing review, but I'm so glad I did. This is a collection of poems that are all inspired by horror movies, and particularly inspired by the women in them. And these are all very iconic movies like Halloween, The Exorcist, etc. And the stories were just so smart, so feminist, and so empowering. I would highly recommend this to anyone who enjoys very feminist horror, and I very much enjoyed this. The only thing that really stopped it from being a 5-star read for me is the fact that I haven't watched a lot of these movies, and that is not the fault of the author because, again, I felt like she picked out some very iconic films. I just haven't watched a lot of horror movies. So this is definitely a collection I would like to come back to in the future as I continue to watch more of these films. I think they will resonate with me even more. But even for the films that I hadn't watched, I still found the poems to be very powerful and held up on their own. So I would definitely recommend this one. It's so different than the things I normally read, and I really loved it. After that, I read a book called The Switch House by Tim Meyer, and this is about a couple that go on a reality TV show where they switch houses with someone else. The story starts off after they are switched back to their own home, and particularly follows the wife in the situation. You find out that something has happened in her past, and she's having a bit of a mental breakdown. And so this is the kind of horror story that is actually less about the haunted house and more so about the woman herself, questioning whether or not she is crazy. The woman believes that the woman that they swapped houses with did something in their home, possibly some kind of ritual or witchcraft, and something in their house is just wrong now. But again, we don't know if that's actually true or if it's just the character going a little bit crazy. I would recommend this horror book to people who enjoy thrillers because it has that unreliable narrator aspect to it. It definitely had that idea, and it certainly did get weird and creepy and went in some unexpected ways. My only real negative with this book is a very personal one, and that's the fact that I'm very burnt out on psychological thrillers. So for me, the classic unreliable narrator just didn't fully work for me. But if that's something that you still enjoy, I would definitely recommend this one. I think that this is a really creative take on a haunted house story where it's not really about the haunted house, which is something I do appreciate. Finally, I want to talk about a horror novella called Triple Axe by Scott Cole. And this is a really fun one that involves a group of female porn stars that are slowly getting killed off by some mysterious slasher. They go to the police, but because of their profession, they aren't taken very seriously, so the women decide to take on the killer themselves and find out what's going on and bring him down. You can tell from that synopsis that this book is going to be very adult. I shouldn't have to say it, but I will, that this book is explicit. It also has lots of adult language, lots of F-bombs, etc. I wouldn't call this book erotic. It's not intended to sexually arouse the reader, but it certainly does deal with sexual content and does not shy away from the realities of the porn industry. I thought this book was actually quite feminist in a way. The women are strong and spunky and had a lot of personality, and I just found it very empowering. And I also like that the book does address a lot of the issues and challenges that these women face in the industry, which of course can be very sexist and unfair to the women that work there. So overall, I would say this was a really fun read, but actually had a lot of substance underneath it. It is a novella, so it's quite short, but I flew through it, and I would definitely recommend it to anyone who enjoys a book with a little bit of adult content. Definitely, I wouldn't recommend this one to young kids, which honestly makes me enjoy it even more because I like adult horror. I like books that are meant for us grown-ups. So that is it for this quick round of recent horror reads. I really think that I have some good ones in this list, so I would love to know which one of the books I mentioned, or several of them, are you planning on picking up. I hope that you're having a good day. I will talk to you again soon. Okay, bye-bye.